You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Just go to Indeed.com/PODKATZ13 right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
The people who I think are going to separate themselves skill-wise over the next 5 years are the ones who get really good at using these tools creatively to make themselves faster, better, smarter, more able to differentiate themselves in the market.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory, walk.
Warning, this is a public service announcement. The Walk in Victory podcast is where we have conversations purposed to evolve lives. You may not want to evolve. Then tune into another bleeping podcast. Everyone else, enjoy the show. And here's our host.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening and or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory walks, there is probably since the first time, I know I often talk about what I've done, right? There's probably since the websites were in the web and Google and all of that stuff being birthed, we have technology and technology and the AI industry. And if you are thinking about how you can personally build scale your company up faster, or be competitive, or be at the front end of this wave. Usually people come in on the tail end of the wave when all the juice is gone, and then they're trying to figure out how they can get some of the juice, and there's nothing left but seeds and residue. You don't want to be that, and we don't want to have our audience kicking on the tail end. So when I went to school for computers, I went to business school, then I went to school for I did a course on computers, the A+, C+, and that's when all of it's relevant. But I should have did networking. The reason why I didn't do the networking and is because the computers were not being built on coding anymore. Websites weren't being built on coding, so that was being faded out or phased out. So there was a lot of more opportunity in really hardware alignment and all of those things. Looking back, I should have did the networking and the coding, because hindsight is 2020. it's back again, and people who understand that language, and it never really went away, because as you work for bigger industries, or even in remote, when you're working in remote stuff, you need to understand some coding, even in platforms where you're building like Squarespace and all those things, where the you're using a model. If you want to be able to make your website individual, you're going to need somebody to code. So what they were saying, and I think that they didn't really do a good job at explaining, is that there's still going to be room for coding. However, it's not going to be as useful. And then what wound up happening is, as the computers got smaller, as things began to evolve, there really was no room for A plus, C plus, and none of that stuff either. But there was room for like the Geek Squad and people who understood how to code and do those things. So it's like that, you're kicking yourself in the butt. But what I would say is that the knowledge that we got was during a time where the industry was booming, and you can easily make 70, 80 to $100,000 depending on how skilled you were, because you were bringing a skill set to people that didn't really understand what was in front of them. Now, they didn't have YouTube videos where they could try to figure out problems and stuff like that. You were the problem solver. And people started to build consulting companies and doing things where they would take their talents from place to place. And you were almost like a specialist coming in, um, fixing people's stuff, and next you to all things figured out. In fact, the faster you got it done, the better you were at it, and that was a tech revolution financially for some industries. And I've watched companies build from just starting to do that. And I said all that to say is I believe that we're in that time again, where prompt engineering, we're developing so many new tech jobs, new tech opportunities from B2B, and there can be a tech revolution that will help people to transfer wealth if you take advantage of it, if you're willing to do the work, and put your head down for 3 to 6 months to learn it, and then really like transform your life, or your children. Talk to your children about, hey man, it's a gold mine, right? And those who are mining the gold will end up with the gold. And those who are sitting down watching and saying, oh, I'm gonna wait till it gets better, they're gonna be sitting on the sideline saying, I wish I could have. So, we don't want
Mhm.
to have that. So that's why we're having this conversation today with Peter. How are you doing, sir?
Doing great, NaRon. How are you?
Is my analogy, I'm great. Is my analogy off? Am I seeing it wrong? Or is there really a great revolution in technology that can help change not just the world, but change people's zip codes, meaning that they get into the business now, they can move
Yeah,
on up like deficits.
totally. Look, I'm glad you're starting there because it's funny. Like, going a lot of podcasts and people mostly want to talk about like, business stuff at a higher level. Like, talking about how AI and the latest technology revolution can impact people positively at the individual level, I think is a much more interesting topic. Yeah, I'm really glad you're starting there. Let me tell you an example of how I am using AI to level up myself, and then I'll bring it back to what you've been talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
I have a background in computer science. I learned to program a long time ago when I was young, and then did a little bit over the years. Um, so when generative AI came out, when ChatGPT came out, and people were starting to use it for coding challenges, or for helping them with coding problems, helping them solve technical problems and other problems. I got interested in using it for that, and I used it to help me through a couple technical issues that I found it difficult to solve myself that I might have just Googled in the past. But where I really started to take off with it and level myself up was when I realized that I can start using it as a coach, right? Like, imagine that
Hmm.
we have at our disposal now these tools which are trained on all of the information that's publicly available out there. So if you're talking technical stuff, that means everything that's on Stack Overflow, everything that's on every blog that anyone has ever put out, all of the tutorials in for every programming language that's out there, right? All of that stuff that's out there on the web, these models are trained on. And so not only can you go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I want to write some code to do the following thing, you can write some code yourself, right? And give it to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your platform of choice is, and ask it for coaching, ask it for advice, ask it for, what could I do better? What have I, done wrong here? Like, even if it works, how could I improve it? How could I, make it more efficient? How could I make it more abstract? How can I make it more reusable? And as these models have gotten better and better and better, you can do that with larger and larger code bases. You can upload an entire piece of software and have it look through and ask it for advice and coaching. It's incredible. I use it for sales coaching. Right, I'll have a sales meeting with one of my customers or prospects. I'll get the transcript from the meeting, put it into ChatGPT, and tell it to play the role of a sales coach or a sales manager and critique my call, right? And it gives me useful advice, and
Hmm.
it's incredible. It's like having a teacher at your disposal, and it's I think it's really democratizing access to training. You don't have to spend so much money for it anymore, and I just think that's phenomenal.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
That's that. See, and it's using what we have in front of us and thinking outside of the box, using our imagination and coupling it together.
Yep.
Because that information that you just shared, people will pay thousands of dollars for, right? To have a
Yep.
genius sales coach to sit down and critique their sales call,
Yep.
right? And
Hmm.
now you don't have to do that. It's
Yeah.
like $20 a month.
Exactly. I mean, look at the highest end. I mean, it's not gonna, if you have the best sales coach in the world, I'm sure it's better than what you can get from ChatGPT. But if you are just starting out, if you are, if you just need like the kind of training that you might just get at any, from any old sales manager at a job, say, or any engineering manager, whatever it is, that kind of coaching can really maybe not replace but definitely enhance, right, the human coaching that you're getting through work, or if you don't have access to it, it's giving you a base to start with. It is, you don't just have to wait for the opportunities to get reps yourself, right? You don't have to wait until you've got a job to go out and practice coding, practice building a website, doing whatever. You can take on the challenge yourself. You can ask ChatGPT for some problems to give you, right? To challenge yourself. It's the you said it. You just said it, right? It's the only limit is your imagination. These tools are so powerful. There's so many creative ways to use them, and I am just blown away constantly at the ways I see people using them creatively to level up their own skills and open up new opportunities for themselves.
So you're computer science. You were a
Mhm.
part of that first wave that we described. Do you see
Yeah.
any similarities? Do you see any differences? That .com, what they call it, the .com wave,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's funny, actually. Yeah, it's man, I haven't thought about this in a long time. I graduated from college in 1999, and I didn't
Mm,
come out intending to work in tech. My very first job, I was working for a consulting firm called Oliver Wyman and Company, and uh, since this was the summer of 1999, every business in the world was trying to start a .com, right?
yeah.
So I showed up to my first day of work, and expecting to be a management consultant, and they said, hey, we're actually starting a .com, you're going to work on it. And so that's what I did for the next 2 years. And yeah, so it was, I didn't plan on it, but ended up, yeah, kind of being around for that first internet wave. And I would, yeah, I would totally compare what we are seeing today to that, and then to another thing. So there have basically been, in my mind, three huge revolutions in technology over the last 25 years. Right. First is the internet revolution, just the existence of the World Wide Web and all of the businesses that enabled, online shopping,
Mhm.
software as a service, all of that stuff. The second wave is cloud services, right? So when um, software started moving
Yeah.
in, yeah, in scale to the cloud, right? Where now you could, you didn't have, in order to start an internet business, you didn't have to get a physical server and access to a network and get it up and running physically. You could just, you could rent a server, a virtual server from Amazon, $30 a month or something, and just, kind of be up and running. And now the third wave is this AI revolution. And like, I think the general trend has been towards making it cheaper and easier for individuals and small businesses to compete with the big boys out there, right? It's just lowering the barriers
Mm,
every single time to getting in the game, right? Like, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, like, to be in the software business meant you had to have physical software distribution. You had to have like a big operation in order to compete with the IBMs and the Microsofts of the world to actually distribute your piece of software. It wasn't easy. In the internet age, well, now all of a sudden you could actually distribute your software. You could sell your goods online. You just had to put up your website. You still had to get some money to run the servers and all that stuff, and it was not trivial, and you needed expertise. But it was easier with the cloud revolution. Like I said, like $30 a month. Now all of a sudden you've got all the infrastructure you need. You can start up your business a lot more easily. You still needed the technical chops to run a server, to run a website, to code HTML, whatever it was that was required for your business. Now, in the kind of post ChatGPT world, um, you barely even need that. There's so many resources available to you through AI where you can just describe what you're trying to do, and AI can help you do it. That anybody who has an idea and has a little creativity, and the willingness to work at it and by trial and error until they get it right, can get going, and start a business. It's start a technical business, right? Not just like opening a store or something like that. To actually like write software. It's amazing how low the barrier is now to getting started. I'm just blown away.
do you find that people are, you said you've been talking to a lot of people in podcasts,
Yeah.
and they're not really looking at the opportunities, that they're so afraid of the jobs that it's going to take away,
Mm.
where it's actually on the flip side creating
Hmm.
um, opportunities. I think there, there's a duality, right? So now
Yeah. Sure.
uh, there are some things that is going to replace, the AI
Yep.
will replace, but
Hmm.
then there's some things that is going to open. And
Cool.
are you looking more at the opportunities, or are people want to just have the conversation about the doors that's going to be closed?
Yeah. I think I think people are mostly interested and open to the idea that there's going to be opportunities, and I certainly fall in that camp. I think for individuals, actually, it's better than maybe for companies. I think for I run a software company, and we're not a huge software company, right? We're not ChatGPT, we're not Google, we're not IBM, we're not Salesforce. And I think the interesting thing is that for a company, it's becoming a big challenge to build software that's going to stay ahead of ChatGPT, basically, right? Because these models are getting more and more capable. So a lot of the tools that people have written, um, that people, are buying still, a lot of those capabilities are actually, you're able to just do natively with ChatGPT. Like, concrete example, there used to be whole businesses devoted to like extracting structured data from contracts, right? Like if you're a company that has a lot of contracts and they're just these scanned PDF files, and you actually want to, figure out who your counterparties are and what the expiration dates are and what the payment terms are, like, you would pay people a lot of money to go through those documents and extract that information either by hand or, with specialized tools. Now you can upload it to ChatGPT or do it in bulk, and it will do a really good job of just pulling that information out. Like that entire, business is if not gone, going away. But for individuals, like I think the opportunities are huge. Um, the analogy I would draw is to accountants and spreadsheets, right? Like accountants used to spend a huge amount of their time literally like doing calculations by hand, right? You would like put out a cash flow projection or something like that, and you change one variable on this paper sheet, and now you got to like redo all the calculations by hand, and they would get paid to do that. And so when the digital spreadsheet came out, like you might have thought that, oh man, accountants are going to get put out of work. But what actually happened was instead of spending their time doing calculations by hand, the computer could now do it. And what they were getting paid to do was what their clients really wanted, which was advice, right? Like now the accounting industry is almost entirely about giving you, tax advice, accounting advice,
Mm.
um, you know, helping you with the problems that you have, right? Whether it's, figuring out your taxes, or as a business, like how do we, what's the most efficient way for us to do some transaction, or, to organize ourselves, whatever the question is. And that actually pays better, right, than doing calculations. That's more valuable work. I think the same thing is starting to happen with lawyers. Like instead of getting paid for like reading contracts and pulling out basic information, it's like, okay, like I want you to help me with this real thorny legal problem. That's the kind of stuff, for a business you're willing to actually pay a significant amount for. Like I don't need to pay a lot of money to just have somebody read my contracts. So
Yeah.
I think there's going to be some reshuffling, right? Like sort of at the lower end of a lot of markets, people might lose work. At the higher end, I think this is just creating more and more opportunities to do higher level work.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
All the more reason for people to use these tools to upskill themselves and level up and get into that higher value work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because if the knowledge is there, if the only thing that's keeping you from the higher level is knowledge, and you're walking
Yeah.
around with the knowledge in your pocket,
Yep.
Instead of
Yep.
listening to some bullshit.
Yeah, look, it's here's the analogy I always get. Like these tools, like they're kind of like having uh an intern with you at all times, and like a really good intern, or like sometimes an expert, right? Like my sales coach, right? Like it's a good sales coach. Um, it's not the world's best sales coach, but if you have access to a pretty good sales coach all the time, whenever you need it, you can do a lot of things with that. If you have access to an intern for free that can do things really fast all the time, that's really valuable, right? But the value is in figuring out how to use it to your advantage. The people who I think are going to separate themselves skill wise over the next 5 years are the ones who get really good at using these tools creatively to make themselves faster, better, smarter, more able to differentiate themselves in the market. Like these tools are opportunities, and they're good people who are going to be good at using them and people who are not good at using them.
So you help people to scale their businesses up and using technology to do so. What does that entail, and what
Yeah.
industries do you really like working with?
Sure. Yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about my current company. It's my second startup. It's called Fast Break RFP. And if I don't know if you or any of your listeners have ever had the pleasure of dealing with a request for proposal, either
Yes, I just said, oh, RFPs.
yeah. Oh man, they're. I have yet to meet somebody who's like, yeah, you know what, RFPs are cool. I really like them. Really
Never.
enjoy doing them. No, man, it is. I don't mean to slag on them, because I think they are a solution to a problem,
Hmm.
and you know people have yet to come up with a better solution. So it's like the worst. It's like the worst thing, except for every other option. Okay, and so for people listening who don't know what a request for proposal is, basically, if you're a big company or a government organization and you want to make a big purchase, um, instead of like going to Amazon and saying like, like looking at reviews, like you might have to go out to a bunch of providers and get sort of customized quotes for your specific needs. Okay. And so that will typically come in the form of you put out this big document and you have a list of requirements and a whole bunch of information you want to gather from the bidders, and they fill it out and give it back to you, and then you look at it and you make a decision. It's a really time consuming process on both sides, both the buyer and the seller. And so what FastBreak does is, for sellers who are receiving these RFPs and want to bid on business, want to bid on these big opportunities, we use AI to look at the RFP, look at the requirements, use their own information that they've got from either past RFPs or documentation, marketing materials, sales collateral, whatever it is, and complete that RFP as best we can. Typically we'll get them between like 70 and 90% of the way there. They'll have like a good first draft, and then they can start kind of tweaking it and customizing it for the specific needs of the opportunity. And then let them collaborate with their colleagues so that they, put their best foot forward, and can respond faster, better, more efficiently, and win more business. And that's what we do.
That's a brilliant business, because the RFP process, and the reason why you have some companies who do
Mhm.
well with getting government contracts and others that don't, is that barrier of
Yeah,
the RFP process. When I was doing
totally.
construction, they had an entire office dedicated for
Yep.
minority businesses to help us
Mhm.
through the RFP process. And even that, it was grueling. You sitting there like,
Sure. Yeah, it's wild. Even so, like, okay, even with the assistance of an office to help you with it, even for big companies that will have their own departments just dedicated to responding to RFPs, it's still painful. So I have I
hmm
have one customer, they're in the health insurance space, and their average RFP, they've done the math, has 1,200 questions. Okay, 1,200
mm,
questions on average. I've seen them as big as 2,500 that they get. And In order to respond to that, they've got a dedicated team of like 12 proposal managers. This is just what they do. That's their job, is just responding to these requests. But on top of that, they have to, for each individual RFP, like imagine 1,200 questions, they've got to get somewhere between, 40 and 50 other people in the company involved who are experts in the different areas that the RFP is asking about. Like, so like I mentioned, this is health insurance. So there are questions about coverage, there are questions about claims, there's questions about, legal changes, there's questions about pharmacy benefits. And, the individual proposal managers can't know the answers to all those questions. They're just kind of the quarterback. And so to respond, it's, even though they do this all the time, every single time they get one, it's like building it up from scratch. They've got to put together the team. They've got to involve, 30, 40, 50 people. They got to figure out how they're going to do it. And then they need to execute. And it takes weeks. It's really, really brutal. But the alternative is even worse. Like, then the buyers have no structure and they don't know what they're even buying. It's just a complicated process all around.
And really, for hospitals using the healthcare industry,
Yeah,
they
sure.
that's a huge part of their lifeline, being able
Mhm.
to get those if it's a state or a city hospital or a private hospital, but still being able to get the funding or purchasing the equipment on time and in time,
Mhm.
is a
Yep.
huge part of what they have to do. So this is not something that they can say, oh, you know what, we're
Sure.
not gonna we're gonna skate that process and we're just gonna charge it to the customer. No, they don't have
No, you
any way around it.
no, exactly. Like, if you're going to compete, if you're going to be, no matter what your industry is, if you're going to be in the business of working with either governments or large companies, large enterprises, at some point you are going to have to complete an RFP.
Hmm.
And even we see this a lot on renewals. Like, people have an existing customer, and you know, instead of just being able to like renegotiate the contract at the next renewal, like, the CFO or whoever says, actually, like, we need to put this out to bid. And so even though you've already got the business, we're going to make you complete an RFP. And, in that circumstance, you might be best positioned to win it because you're already there, but you still have to do it. You can't just say, now we're not going to do it, because then you're going to lose the business. Yeah, it's tough.
What made you decide that that was something that you was going to use the technology for?
Mhm.
What was the thought process behind it? Besides the fact that you knew you could save people time, but how did you see a market in
Sure.
that industry?
Yeah. So I used to actually sit on the opposite side of this. So my first startup, yeah, my first startup was a tool to help people issue RFPs and do other stuff to manage their suppliers. But we were trying to make the buying process more efficient. That was the mission of startup number one. It's called Venderful, and what we learned along the way, both from our own experience, because we were selling to the kinds of organizations that run RFPs, which means even for even to help them, even to sell them RFP software, we would have to respond to RFPs. So we got used to doing that ourselves and just said, "Oh man, this is really complicated. This is, yeah, it's very time consuming. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a tool we built to automate this?" And when we first had that idea, like, this was a pre-ChatGPT world. It's like, yeah, that's kind of science fiction. Like, I mean, maybe if we collected years and years of data, maybe we could figure out the language stuff and put it together. And then, a couple years later, ChatGPT emerges on the scene, and it's like, oh wow, all this stuff that we thought was impossible is now available really cheap. And so we sold that business and went on to do the other idea, which was helping people respond to those RFPs.
And do you find that this is more lucrative in terms of what you were doing before? And
It's
is there
different. It's a different. So it's like the first business, we were selling to procurement teams. Like procurement inside big companies, it's procurement teams that are in charge of kind of making these, running RFPs, selecting suppliers, and so on. And procurement has interesting dynamics. They're very compliance driven. They're very cautious, risk averse,
Mm.
and it made it, let's say, more difficult to sell to them, more time consuming, and also, they would have budget challenges. They're kind of a cost center. They're not like they're not viewed as a profit center, and so they'd often have to get budget approval from somebody else in order to buy software like ours. But the flip side of that was that once you'd crossed that hurdle, they tended to be very, very sticky. Like they would we'd work with them for a very, very long time. And so they were very good customers to have. So it was kind of harder to sell, maybe, very, very price conscious, but very sticky. In, the new business, we're selling to sales teams, and that's a whole different ballgame. Like if they have a problem, they want it solved yesterday. Okay. And so they're very fast to make a decision. They usually have, if not direct control over their own budgets, they've got a lot more influence over their budgets. And so, if they've decided to solve a problem, it's usually pretty fast to get them over the line and execute the contract. On the flip side, they're also, kind of more likely to, change their minds and move on to something else if it's not working out for them. Or they feel like there's maybe something better and there's something kind of shinier and newer. So, easier to sell, maybe a little less sticky. It's a different dynamic. I'll just say that. Like, I don't think one is better or worse. They're quite different.
How often do you have to upgrade your knowledge base and your technology, as because things are constantly are fluid and moving?
Yep. Constantly. It's just it's never ending. So like I mentioned earlier that part of the challenge of running a software business nowadays is sort of staying ahead of these
Hmm.
giant AI platforms. So when we first started FastBreak, our initial idea was that we were going to help small businesses with RFPs, small to medium sized businesses. I didn't think we were going to tackle big companies initially. And when we first started, like that was fine. That was a pretty good market. Within, I would say, 6 months of launching, we launched in September of last year. So September 2023. So we've been live for a little more than a year. I would say within 6 to 9 months, we were starting to see small and medium sized businesses just go straight to ChatGPT to respond to these RFPs because the capabilities of those platforms got good enough that now you
Hmm.
could upload some content, you could upload your RFP, and it would do, I would say, like a B plus to B minus job of giving you a draft, but it would do it for free, right, or for $20 a month. Yeah. And that's good enough, right? If you're a small business, that's good enough. So, like what we realized is like, first of all, we've got to stay ahead of them. We've got to be offering something superior to that experience. And then the other thing we realized is that like, it's not enough for us to just be helping people fill out these questionnaires because ChatGPT can do that itself. We've got to be offering better features, collaboration features, the ability to work with a team, things that are maybe specialized to specific industries, something to differentiate us and keep us from just being kind of like, a wrapper around ChatGPT. Because I don't think there's any long-term business there. So yeah, so to answer your question, it is a never-ending challenge to be constantly innovating and staying ahead of other technologies and offering something on top of just like what you can get through what you can get for free.
And I'm glad that you pointed that out because that actually goes back to our initial conversation,
Mhm.
where yes, ChatGPT or any AI is replacing some jobs, but now it's up to us to be creative to say,
Mhm.
hey, because even if I'm a small business and I can go and then I can put the RFP into ChatGPT and it's give me a B plus
Mhm.
RFP response,
Yep.
there's still some steps that I have to have to get it to
Yep.
an A, to get it to an A
Mm-hmm.
plus. So it won't sound so generic. There's still some things that are left out. So the entrepreneur in you said, all right, we're going to help you get to the finish line. Yeah, you can use ChatGPT for that, but you might not get the proposal. At the end of the day, we don't want to sit down and do these
Yep.
RFPs and not get the proposal.
Yep. Yep. That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, exactly right. I still think there's a lot of additional value to add, but I think my point is like, and you were getting at this, like you just can't be complacent.
Mhm.
And things are changing so fast. It's a strong incentive to not get complacent. Like you're going to get rolled over by the steamroller of Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, if you just sit still.
So what do you see in the, well, is it almost difficult to really look off into the distance and say, this is where we probably would be landing? Or, or
Hmm.
are we going to be sitting down 6 months from now talking about this new stuff that just came out that's blowing everybody's mind?
That is a great question, and I don't know. Here's what I've come to. I think I can see the world going one of two directions with this technology. Either it keeps getting better and better and better, in which case, like, everyone in software is sort of out of a job because the models like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini just keep getting better to the point where you just tell it what you want it to do and it will do it. And look, if that happens, like, okay, hey, we all got to figure out what we're doing with our lives. So I'm not going to worry about it because I can't do anything about that. The other alternative, which I think is probably a little more likely, is that they get a little bit better, but they kind of plateau. And I think you're starting to see some signs that they're plateauing because they're already trained on all the information out there, right? There's no more, or I don't want to say no more, but I know this is one of the struggles these companies have, is coming up with more training data to build more sophisticated models. So they might get faster, they might get a little better. I think it's unlikely they're going to get like, super, or take a gigantic leap beyond where they are today. And so if they get a little bit better, then probably what's going to happen is they're just going to keep getting cheaper and cheaper. And as they get
Mm,
cheaper and cheaper, then they start to get interesting in different ways because these capabilities will get embedded everywhere, right? Because if it's, if it costs next to nothing to have ChatGPT like capabilities embedded in every piece of software you use, then it's going to be embedded in every piece of software
every
that you
piece of
use.
software.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In everything. And so, I don't know if it'll keep getting better, but it's going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be everywhere. We're all going to be interacting with these kinds of systems. And, I don't know what that looks like. So, sorry, you're asking me for my opinion on what the future holds. And it's a big, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting. I think it's a really exciting time to be in software because everything is changing so fast. But like, yeah, I think anyone who tells you that they know how this is all going to look 2 years from now is exaggerating.
Oh, my last question.
Yeah,
Next to last question. I was
sure.
heavy on the NFT
Uh huh.
thing at one point. What happened to the
Yep.
NFTs in the NFT market?
Oh man, you are asking the wrong person. I don't know. I never got involved with that. I remember when I first read about Bitcoin, 12 years ago or whatever. I thought, hey, this is really interesting. Just kind of didn't do anything. Watched it, watched the technology evolve. I've never. It's just crypto's never been my thing. I've just been focused on other aspects of software. Yeah, so couldn't tell you.
Yeah, there you have it. Listen, what books have influenced you, impacted you in your career?
Sure.
Could be fiction, nonfiction.
Oh, okay. Definitely got a couple nonfiction books really, really influential for me. So I'm gonna try to limit it to three,
Okay.
because I could list 10 easily. But okay, so there's one on my desk right now. It's called Founding Sales. Um, I mentioned like having to coach myself on sales. I don't have a background in sales. And one of the things I've discovered founding a company is there's a lot more sales than I realized. Like you cannot, especially at the early stages, you cannot outsource that work to anybody. Like you've got to do it yourself until you reach a certain scale. So I've had to level up my sales. So Founding Sales, great book. I wish I'd read it 10 years ago. Glad I read it, a few years ago, finally. Second book, High Output Management by Andy Grove, who was used to be the CEO of Intel. And it's an old book. It's 40 years old. And so if you read it, there's like references to like fax machines and paper memos and all that stuff. But the stuff that he talks about is still super relevant. The biggest thing he ingrained in me through that book is that like when you're thinking about how to manage people, the output of the people in your organization, of any individual person in your organization, is kind of the sum of what they do themselves plus the influence that they have on other people, right? And so like if you have a great performer, but is sort of a negative personality and kind of makes everyone else a little worse, that adds up. If you have like an okay performer, but that person levels up everybody around them, like that's impactful. And so like thinking about that sort of stuff is really, really important. The third book, maybe not like critical every single day, but super, super impactful when it comes up. Never Split the Difference. It's a book about negotiating. Pretty popular one. It will, if you've never read a book about negotiation, it will just completely change or blow your mind in terms of the techniques and sort of like, not thinking in terms of like power dynamics, but like thinking in terms of like listening and making the person you're negotiating with kind of want to give you everything. It's really just a very interesting set of concepts. And I keep rereading it every few years. It's so good.
There you have it, everybody. Told you we set you at the feet of the masters. Peter is one of the masters. If you need to scale your business up, all of his information is under the description. Right under the description, there is his website. You go to the website, you get the clarity call, you get that information that you need in order for you to move forward and in your victory walk. We don't ask you to catch up to Venmos or anything like that, but we do ask that you hit like and subscribe. It helps us to get in the algorithm. If you're listening on a platform that allows you to leave reviews, please leave us a review. You notice I didn't stop every 5 minutes to say, hey, leave a review, leave a review, leave a review. If we do so, that's your currency to us for the information, this valuable information that we're giving towards you. Don't walk making excuses. Don't walk allowing these trends to keep you in a place of fear and flux. Together, Peter is now part of our Walk in Victory family, and together we walk in victory. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.